My name is Dorian Paskowitz, and everyone, including my children, called me Doc. In fact, one of my sons named his son Doc. I am 89 and a half years old, born in March 3rd, 1921.
Yes, doctor.
I grew up in a family of my father, my mother, later my sister, then my brother, my Uncle Morris, who was a sickly uncle that my mother took care of, and at one time one of her sisters. We grew up in a little different kind of Jewish environment than most because my parents came from a small little cowboy towns in Texas, even though that their parents were born in Poland and Russia and so forth. They migrated to Wharton, Texas for my father, and Cuero, Texas for my mother. Then they moved to a small island in the Gulf of Mexico called Galveston, a rather romantic island separated that had the distinction of being the greatest catastrophe in the history of America. A tidal wave from a hurricane came up, washed over the island, and drowned 8,000 people overnight. I grew up in that environment, and it was not, and I don't know why, but my mom and dad weren't very Jewish in the sense of the other Jews that had immigrated to that place. I noticed that my mother did a few Jewish things like changing the silverware at Passover, but there was not much synagogue going, and there was not much, there just wasn't much of that. And so that I think I've always had a kind of a lacking in Jewish culture. But the whole dominant atmosphere of my life was that island because it was surrounded by water. And I fell in love with the water at 9 years of age. At 11, I fell in love with surfing. By the time I had become 13, surfing was my life. And from that point on, I would say that has done more to color and fashion my existence on this planet than any other thing. One of my friends interviewed me and said, Paskowitz, if you had to choose between surfing and Judaism, which would you choose? And I said, surfing, because really from surfing, I have gained a kind of a wisdom, a stature, a courage, a passion that nothing else, except perhaps, wife, children, so nothing else in the world, nothing came even close. That's right.
Yeah.
Surfing is more than a sport, it's actually a lifestyle. My son was reading me the credentials of a young physicist who supposedly has revolutionized modern theoretical physics, even overpowering the work of Hawking in England. And they asked him, what does he do when he was interviewed? And he said, I'm a surfer and I'm a physicist. But he made clear he was a surfer for. May I tell you a little story as to how as I say, I had asthma most of my life. And I suffered terribly in Texas, where I was raised, Galveston, this island. And one spring morning, Sunday spring morning, I lay in my bed and I was really sick. I was feverish. I was coughing up terribly. I was on the verge of really having pneumonia. I was really sick. My parents were worried about me. My mother put the bed in the front room where I got a little more sun. And I heard the morning paper strike the door, and I said to my mother, it was quite early, around 7, "Mommy, will you bring me the funny papers?" Because in the paper was a whole list of the Sunday funnies. You probably know about that. But in the center of the paper, which was, I think, an offshoot of the Los Angeles Times, was a magazine. You probably had that in Canada. A magazine type of, and I got that magazine, and I took that out first, and I opened it up, and I opened it to the centerfold, and there was the most gorgeous wave in the world. Not like our Galveston waves, which much like this, where the wind and the wave come together and the sea is choppy, but a glassy wave, just even as if it had been etched, you know, on the sea. And on this beautiful wave were 3 guys riding. At that time I was in the heartland of my passion for surfing. And I said, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, come here, come here." She came running up, you know, and she said, "What's wrong, Dolly boy? What's wrong?" And she called me Dolly boy. My dad called me Dolly boy till I was 70 years old. "What's wrong, Dolly boy?" "Oh, Mommy, Mommy, look at this, look at this. If you take me to where that wave is, I'll get well tomorrow." And she said, "Dolly boy, if you get well tomorrow, I'll take you to that wave day after tomorrow." And actually, we both did exactly what I said. I, for some reason, suddenly became well. In a matter of 15 minutes, my lungs cleared, my fever dropped, and I felt strong, like I wasn't sick. And in 1 month's time, my mother took everything we owned and told my father, "Clear up whatever business you have." He was just a shoe salesman, so he wasn't some professional or something, and come get us. But we're going. We all piled into a, I think my dad borrowed money enough to buy a new 34 Ford car. We all piled in there, including Uncle Morris, and off we went on the basis of that picture. Later on, I surfed there with those men. They became kind of my heroes. But that's how powerful the sport. Yeah. First thing, I never escaped from any convention.
Okay. Oh, wait, maybe you can tell me.
I've been really a beach bum from the time I was 13 years old, and I never had any conventional life from which I leaped from there to nomadism. I haven't changed my ways. I am still the same. Well, I'm still just as poor as my daddy was, and I still have no, I don't own any land, I don't own a house, I don't have a car, I don't have an insurance policy. I exist primarily from welfare now because I don't have a way of earning a living because I don't take money for my medical services. So I never escaped from anything to anything. I mean, it's just been a line. But the line has been a line, not a philosophic line of denial or resurrection or anything like that. It's just been that way of life has been to me the way I could be near my kids, near my wife. And I didn't go to work. My wife was right there. My kids didn't go to school. They just surfed with me.